Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with my co-host, America's sweetheart, Ike Eisenmann. So we are very excited because we have a great back-to-back episodes with 2 weeks now. It's October, so this is the spooky month. And so Ike and I decided to do our favorite horror movies. And there's a catch here. We're going to do from the 1930s until now. We pick only one per decade. And this was tough. This was very tough.
I got to tell you, it was way tough for me, especially getting into the 50s and 60s. It seemed like the 30s and 40s, and obviously we'll cover that pretty quickly here, was fairly straightforward, but all of a sudden I was in a serious conundrum about which one to pick, and had to qualify my picks in a certain way. So
that's the funny thing that you're saying, the qualify, because all right, I'm going to say I'm sure that yours are going to be. I'm going to be so shocked if we even have one the same in any decade. Okay,
well, which is interesting, but I have a feeling there might be one, and it's going to be later on in the next show. But I'm deeply curious about that, and I also have picked randomly what I think your 50s one is going to be, and we'll wait till we get there before I share that, because I think I don't know. I think it's just you. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm going to guess at some of yours too, but I'm going to see if I'm right on some of yours. But
I know you'll be right. I know you'll be right about one of mine. I know you will. Because,
I have no doubt I'm going to be right about in the next episode.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay. So there we are.
I'll say this. Here's how I quantified this. And okay, so there's no right or wrong. I know ahead of time, I'm going to get blasted in the comments for my picks. I think yours will not, but I'm going to get blasted for my picks, and I'm going to get some eye rolls. That's not horror. So, but yes, when I looked at the list, I looked up per decade, horror movies per decade, and they appeared. If they appeared on the list, I figured that they were suitable. And here's how else I'm going to quantify it. I'm going to say that my choices went by, one, if there's some scares in it, and rewatchability, if that's a word.
I think, yeah, I consider it a word. If both of us use it, it should be in the dictionary. I think rewatchability is well, it's critical to any classic, or anything that you enjoy. If you enjoy it, you're going to rewatch
exactly.
And it's so much easier to rewatch movies than it is to reread books. But I think that works in both ways. Anything that you want to revisit is definitely important. Maybe not to everyone, but for each of us individually.
Well, I'm not even saying rewatchability for other people. I'm going to say for me.
Yeah,
that's
right. What I mean. It's personal.
There might be some movies that are considered absolute classics, and I did not pick them. And I'm going to say it ahead of time. This is a spoiler. I did not pick them because I don't watch them as much as I watch some of the others that I did pick.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, look, hey, criteria is everything. Otherwise,
right.
We're just throwing darts.
Subjective, all our personal tastes. And how we do it like this? Well, okay, so this episode, we're going to do 1930s to 1970s, one per decade. Okay, I'm going to let you go first this one, and I'll go first the next one.
Okay, well, fair enough. So we're starting with the 30s, and my pick from the 30s just had to be Frankenstein. I mean, it's obviously the ultimate classic horror movie of all time, the classic horror story of all time, and even in talking about these films from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, obviously I didn't see these movies until I was 8 or 9 years old on television in the 60s, when they were on Saturday nights, or, was it Friday night, Fright Night, or I don't know. They were, even getting later on into the Elvira, series presenting horror movies and creepy movies and all that on a regular basis, all these films were populating television in a huge way. And so I saw them obviously at a young age, but clearly not in the 30s. But I there are so many, so many reasons that Frankenstein is such an outstanding horror story. Because it's not, it's a created monster. And the thing that I love about Frankenstein now is you look like Frankenstein on Amazon, you're going to get the monster's face everywhere, right? Yes. And Frankenstein was the man who created the monster. Yes. It's Frankenstein's monster, not Frankenstein the monster. And that gets so, convoluted for people, which I think is hilarious. Really the true villain in the film is the doctor.
Scientist,
for what the scientist, for what he did. He created an innocent creature that just did, went about. It really wasn't terrorizing. It was trying to figure out what it was. And that is so horrific on so many levels for me. And I remember reading the book, Mary Shelley's book, and just being blown away, first of all, when I discovered that it was written by a woman. I thought that was amazing. It was even conceived of by a woman, because I think that's very rare in the horror genre, period. And of course, I could be very ignorant about this, but
not now. That maybe back then, now. Now this,
but because even when I looked up when it was written, because I think it was written in like 1868 or something like that. It was
right.
I don't remember the exact year, but it goes way back. So
did you read the book first or see the movie first?
Oh, no. I saw the movie. I was too young to read the book. I didn't even know it was based on a book. Even having watched the movie until I got older. And then as I got older, I started reading classics, or trying to, just expand my own horizons about all of this kind of material, and finding out, of course, even going back to Escape to Witch Mountain, that it was based upon a book. My awareness of that obviously grew as I got older. So yeah, I think I read it probably in high school. That
sounds likely.
Yeah. And it's been a long time, so I don't remember as much about the book, other than it just being incredibly compelling. And so fundamentally, Frankenstein for me is maybe not, it's more about the horror of what this thing is going to do and why, and not so much this plotting, lumbering, murderous, mindless creature. It was a very mindful creature, and in the book, much more intelligent that it was portrayed in the movie. And I thought that made it even more horrific. But yeah, that's my pick for the 30s, gotta say, and remains to this day one of my favorites.
I looked at the list of the things in the movies, horror movies in the 30s, and that's the start of all those great Universal monster movies. And so there were so many good choices to pick from them. I was debating that Frankenstein. I was debating King Kong. I know Freaks came out then too, and that's a movie that I saw once in film class, and I could never watch it again. It disturbed me too much to watch it.
And I should have picked it. I had it in my list, and I should have picked it. The reason why I didn't was because of that rewatchability factor that you mentioned. Actually, when I look here on my list, I had Freaks as the pick. I think I just switched all of a sudden because I was going with the classic. But yeah, for those of you who do not know what this film is, and I think it's worth mentioning because it is probably the most disturbing movie ever made, period. And it ruined Todd Browning, the director and creator of it, directed Dracula, which was also a very terrifying film in the 30s. But he created this film as an answer to Frankenstein, as I understand the history of it. And he was particularly fascinated by what were known in the day as circus freaks or carnival sideshow freaks. And the entire film has very few actual actors in it. All the characters in it are actual
who worked in that. Right.
Yeah, they worked in that industry. Right down to one character, and I'll only describe this scene. Everyone can seek this film out if they want to experience it. But this one character in it has no arms and no legs, and he is listening to a conversation while he is actually lighting a cigarette in his mouth. It is one shot of him laying there with no digits to use, and using his face, his chin, and his nose, pushes open a matchbox, pulls out the match, strikes the match, and lights his own cigarette. And it is the most, it's like amazing to watch, but it encapsulates how powerful the human spirit is in the midst of such grotesque limitations and unfortunate, difficult limitations. And so all these characters are, they're part of this community, and they're mistreated, and they get their revenge in the end. And in a lot of ways, it's a really good film, but good grief, it's so difficult to watch. So yeah, I had it on my list, but I jumped ship there because I watched it one more. I think I've watched it 3 times. The initial watching, I said, oh God, I can't ever see that again. And then I revisited it, and then out of curiosity, and then I did one more time just to say, okay, this is my last time, just to keep it in my head, and then that's it, because it's just way uncomfortable. So I agree.
You watched it one more time than I did, because that was it. I saw it in film class, and that was it for me.
Yeah.
But I did pick one of the Universal monsters. I picked The Mummy. I love the movie. I love that whole myth. Everything. Every time there's been something on The Mummy, no matter what year or decade it is, I'm drawn to it. I'll still watch it. I think I mentioned to you that one of my favorite amazing stories was
that's right. That's right.
The Mummy one. I love the '90s one too with Brendan Fraser. I love everyone, and this was the start of it for me. And it was just, and looking at it, it shouldn't be as scary as it is, but it was scary. The thing, but the Mummy walks like around 2 miles an hour, so so you should be able to theoretically get away from it, but it still creeped me out as a kid, and I think it was such a great movie. And like I said, anytime there's something with the Mummy, I even watched that terrible one with Tom Cruise, but I'm going to watch it no matter what it is.
Because that was Boris Karloff again, correct? Didn't he play the Mummy? So we've got two dueling Boris Karloff films. Was The Mummy an original story for the movie, or was it also based on?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I think it came out because it was shortly after the Tutankhamun thing. I think finding that. I think that was not too long, and that was what inspired the story. So I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look that up, and I should have done my research for that now too. But
oh no, that's all right. But it's like he's also, now that you mention how slowly he moves, he's like the original zombie,
right?
In so many ways. I mean, that's really the foundation of, well, at least all the zombies that I like. They're very slow moving but relentless. Yeah,
I love all those things. And Boris Karloff was great. All those characters back then. Lon Chaney Jr., Bela Lugosi, all of them were great.
Yeah.
So that is mine from the 30s, and so now we're going to go on to the 40s when I'm going to get killed. But I'll let you go first.
No, you said you were going first.
I thought no. Next episode I'm going to go first. Do you want to switch off?
Oh, this whole, all right. Okay, I get to go first
by decade if you'd like.
All right. No, that's fine. I picked the Wolfman from the 40s.
That's a great one.
It was maybe, I don't know if it was one of the, no, because probably Jekyll and Hyde, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde might have been one of the first films that showed a character actually transitioning on camera, turning into the creature or the monster. And they did such an impressive job for the 40s. And again, I watched this when I was, a child, 8 or 9 years old. And it was incredible to see this creature come alive on camera. And again, in a way, he's an innocent human who is infected with this condition and has no control over it, and then turns into a creature that ends up being murderous, and he doesn't intend to be. So it's like that. It's like you're the monster, you're out of control, there's nothing you can do, and all hell breaks loose as a result of it. And I found it really, really unsettling, and and quite terrifying. And I think that was Lon Chaney as well.
I think that was Lon Chaney Jr.
Yeah, Junior, Lon Chaney Jr.
Right.
Yeah, he was the one that did most of the, seemed like all the makeup
Right.
monsters. Yeah, he was the makeup king.
The Wolfman was my favorite of all the Universal monsters, and it's funny because I don't actually pick it in this decade, but it was my favorite of all the Universal monsters. And you're right, it's such a sympathetic character. It's not to his fault. He has no control over what he's doing, and it's and he's hunted down for it.
Yeah, nuts. And obviously it's like all these monsters have turned into franchises on their own. It's been revisited so many times, and I think that's I think not only rewatchability but also the legacy of how often filmmakers go back and retell these stories in different ways, or trying to outdo the originals. And
Right.
And some of them do a great job. Some of them really do, but you can't ever discount the incredible impact of these films. And I just can't imagine going to the movie theater and seeing the Wolfman on the screen for the first time. I mean, in the 40s,
Right.
in the
Right.
40s, it had to be terrifying. And just as a side comment, I there was a theater in Los Angeles that played silent movies, and that had an organist, and so they played movies from the silent movie era with the accompanying live organist, which I unfortunately never went to. But then there was another theater across town.
That sounds really cool, by the way.
yeah, it was amazing. But I like an idiot, was too busy and couldn't be bothered. But I think it was called the New Art Theater on Santa Monica Boulevard, and they played a lot of things. They were like one of the theaters that played the Rocky Horror Picture Show every Friday or Saturday night at midnight, with all the everyone acting out the film in front of it, which is a huge thing now, but it kind of started around, it might have been even that theater. But anyway, they would play movies from the 40s, and they had incredible prints that they ran, and I went and saw 2 or 3 of them. And when you spend all of your life watching a classic black and white film on a TV screen, maybe this big, you don't realize the impact of what those images look like when they're 30 feet tall, 20 feet, 30 feet tall. It's absolutely incredible. And the filmmaking skill in those days was this sounds like a silly statement. All movies are made for cinematic impact on a big screen, but they knew how to go from close up to wide shot to close up to really heightened intensity. And so when I think of a film like The Wolfman, particularly, seeing that up there just must have been extraordinary. That's all I can
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It must have been like, we look at all these old movies and I try to telling my kids this too. We see the special effects and they roll their eyes at some of these special effects. And I said, back in that day, these audiences were terrified of some of these things.
Yeah.
A lot of the movies. This was cutting edge stuff to them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No one had ever seen anything like it before. And I think we may have even talked about this on the show. I mean, one of the first examples of how powerful cinema was with audiences when it was in its earliest days, when they were doing experimental shorts that people saw. And one of the first edited films where the filmmaker actually edited from one thing to another. And I don't remember the name of it, but the scene that it shows is a damsel in distress tied to railroad tracks by the villain, by the arch villain, and the train is coming, and they cut between the train and her and the train, and of course neither one of them was anywhere near each other. But when he put up a shot of the train coming straight at camera, the audiences screamed, jumped up, and flew back because they thought this thing was coming out at them. Right. The visceral reaction to the imagery, because it was so brand new on the brain. And we've yes, we become accustomed to certain things, then we expect more, and then as it moves along, now everything's so incredibly realistic that
Yep,
it's it's incredible to me. So yes, I mean, trying to educate the mindset that this was something no one had ever seen before, and you really thought you were actually watching a man turn into a wolf in front of your very eyes. Yeah.
Well, here's okay. So I'm going to go into mine from the 40s, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to preface it by saying, to all our viewers, I love you all. I look forward to your comments disparaging my picks. So I picked, because again, it has to have scares to me. That's my criteria. It does have to have scares, somewhat rewatchability. So this did have scares in it, and I picked Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. That was my
favorite. No. Yes. Okay, you're gonna be so proud of me, because for the 50s, okay, you can't tell me if I'm right or wrong. For you, I picked Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy.
No, you are wrong, but I just say
but see, I knew one of those had to be. I knew one of them had to be, and they spanned those 2 decades, because they had Meets Frankenstein, and I think they had Meets. Didn't they have Meets Dracula also, or not?
That was in the same movie. It was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. They had them all in that same movie.
Okay, go ahead. I need to let you talk, but yeah, I knew you were going to pick one of them.
Okay, because this is at the end. This is at the Universal monsters are starting to fade out at this time. So Abbott and Costello are riding hot, so they decided to put them in there. Get the scares, get the comedy, and you're going to see my picks around the rest of this list go along this line. The horror comedy hybrid for a lot of my choices. So this was the start of it right there. I loved Abbott and Costello. There were scary parts in it, and when I put up horror movies of the 40s, this was on the list, so I don't care. Someone else had it on the list, so I am allowed to pick it. That is my criteria only. So
that is, of course, that's your prerogative, but I knew there was going to be a comedy element for you, because I know this about you. And I knew you were going to pick one of them. I just didn't know which. So I picked the wrong decade, so I failed there, but I wasn't far off.
No, it's but you, like you said, if you go through the rest of the decades, it's pretty much going consistently, except for like one. It's pretty much consistently. It's going to be the horror comedy hybrid in there. So
okay, well, now you got me terribly curious, since I missed the mark on the 50s. So we'll see.
We're starting there. So all right, but this is it, Abbott and Costello, and so now we can go on to the 50s. And now I'm curious. 50s was such a fun decade. You look at the horror movies. This is, I think, when horror movies became fun. You had all those ones like the Blob, Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Fly, The Thing. So there's so many fun ones here.
Oh yeah, this was super tough for me, because I have so many of my favorites of all time were from this decade. So I'm gonna run off my top 3 were. This is not my. I'm gonna get to my pick last, but like 3 of the ones that I just struggled with were The Day the Earth Stood Still, which I still love to this day, because it was such an intellectual, it was a smart, it was more science fiction again than horror. So it didn't quite make it, but it did come up on the list. Like you said,
those 2 genres cross a lot, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely they do. And that seems to be everybody who's a movie buff says the same thing. And when I have conversations with people, they mention that all the time. I loved them simply because it was so ridiculous. And I love giant insect movies or giant lizard movies. I just think they're just hilarious. It was not scary to me as a kid, but it was just amazing. Where I got down to was War of the Worlds, which, gosh, it was, especially as a child for me, was completely terrifying. Watching that movie, but the one that won out for me, and still does to this day, because it really scared me, was Invaders from Mars.
Good movie. Also.
And I think that the reason why it stood out for me was the really the main protagonist of the film was a child, and he's watching his parents turn into like disappear and then come back as zombie like mindless creatures, and his confusion, and then seeing the flying saucer and trying to solve everything and no one listens to him. It was very much one of those, you know, a child is not taken seriously until he is, and then when he is, it's like the earth's being taken over by these horrible creatures. And the set piece that really scared me and made me terrified to go in my own backyard after watching it was how they trapped the humans, was opening up this hole in the sand where you got sucked underground, and then you were inside this completely other world, inside of this spaceship underground with these Martians in it. And the main Martian, the big floating head and body with the tentacles inside the dome, and oh good grief, it just absolutely had me shaking in front of my television. And of all of these movies, not all of them, there's only a few of them, 3 of them that I actually own. Oh no, 4 of them, but because War of the Worlds is one of them that I own on DVD. That's one of them. I had to have it. I had to own it because it was that meaningful to me as a child. When I saw it, just completely terrified me. And actually doing research on it, one of the other things that was noted about the film, it wasn't shot in Technicolor like most movies were. It was like cinema color or something like that, where the colors were so vibrant and so rich and so over the top that it created, it was a completely different visual experience than most other movies of the day. And I thought it was extremely effective in this type of horror story, really, essentially. So yeah, that was my pick.
Well, you had the 50s, all those things that we're talking about, like, you know, the people being taken over. I mean, they were all the, you know, substituting for the communist scare. That was the
oh yeah, body snatchers, for goodness sakes. I mean,
right.
That's, you know, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's another one that's just, it's like, again, how do you really narrow it down? And that was what did it for me. It was just how impactful it was on me at the time.
Well, here's this. Okay, so here's mine. Okay, the same thing you mentioned before. Watching it, these were always on the weekends. I remember watching these movies with my dad, and that probably played an impact into it too. But 1950s for me was Godzilla. I love the Godzilla movies. They were on all the time on WPIX in New York or WOR. They had, you know, I watched them they were always on the weekend. All the monster movies were on the weekends. And so I sat there watching, and out of all those big monster ones, Godzilla is my favorite. Another one, like I said, with the Mummy, Godzilla is one that I'll watch every single version of it that comes out. I don't care what people, if they'll kill it, they'll say it's terrible or not. I got to watch the Godzilla movie.
Oh, you know what? That's such a great pick. And I didn't gravitate there for the reasons that I just explained, but I loved watching those films as well. And I think one of the things about them, for me, as an, you know, impressionable young person, you know, understanding the world a little bit, they were Japanese movies. These were Japanese movies dubbed into English, and almost all the actors, you can tell me better than I recollect, but like the first films were all Japanese characters, and then all of a sudden they started to bring in American actors to play characters in them. And they kind of all blend together for me. But
well, they had, I think a lot of times too, they did dub the earlier ones, but I think later on they filmed them, and then they had just inserted American actors into certain scenes and kept the rest of the, you know, movie the same, intact.
Yeah.
So they had like 2 different versions of the movie. I'm pretty sure that's what I read with the Godzilla ones. But they're just so much fun. And then he started fighting all these other, like all of a sudden, you know, the first one he's a monster. The next one he's like the hero. He's saving everyone from all these other creatures. So,
well, I mean, look, this is stupid cliche, but I loved the miniature cities, and watching this. I couldn't imagine being the actor that got to walk through and kick and
Right.
and destroy the work, the week's worth of work building these miniature, environments. And miniatures have always been a weak spot for me. I love them. I was into model trains as a kid, and so seeing that was always awesome for me. And I don't know if you know this about the lore of the Godzilla movies, but I think the same actor was in the Godzilla suit for many films.
That I
and
guess.
and he told stories. It was just in the last couple of years, maybe a year or so, where he talked about how the original Godzilla suit, which was this massive heavy rubber thing that zipped up the back that he could barely breathe in, but the first time he had to get into the water tank and submerge himself and then try to come out of it, he nearly died.
Oh my, I didn't hear that. No.
The suit filled with water, and as it filled with water, he couldn't lift himself up out of the water. I mean, he weighed an extraordinary amount because the suit itself was already heavy,
right, sure.
But like filled with water, and it was just rising up and filling his mask, and he was waving his hands, and finally everyone came in and rescued him and like tore the suit open and like this unleashed this torrent of water that spilled out.
Gosh.
And he said something, obvious and prophetic: we've got to fix the suit.
Wow.
So I don't know how they manage that going forward, but man, you just think about all these crazy things about, it's simple. Put a guy in a rubber suit, have him get in the water and come out. No big deal, right? But good
like
gosh,
you said,
tragedy.
How much fun it is to go and destroy those.
Oh
those cities.
gosh, yes. I mean, I would absolutely love it. So that's something I'm going to have to revisit. It's been a long time since I've seen any of them, and I think I love those. I really need to. They're and just.
By the way, I'm into these model train things too. I keep saying that I want one like tracks on the walls, just going around the house, like maybe bringing me a drink.
Yes.
I'm overruled in here. I don't know why.
Yeah, I actually tried to build a monorail when I was a kid, because I thought nothing like that existed. I wanted an elevated track that did go around my room, and I thought, okay, how can I build a shell that can go on that can be electric, that can just go over the top of my trains. And I didn't have the tools or enough skill to try to approach it, but I had conceived of this whole thing that I was going to build and run it around the walls of my room. So yeah, it's a big deal.
They do have the monorail sets now, that.
Oh yeah, of course they do, but I kind of outgrew some of that stuff, but
oh, not me. Not me.
Just look behind me. Like I say that as I'm sitting around with all my Mickey Mouses
toys.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to do that next time. All right, let's move on. 1960.
All right, 1960, hands down, Rosemary's Baby.
That's one of them that I knew you were gonna pick.
Oh yeah, no, because I
mentioned it before.
Yeah, and I did not see this when I was a kid. I experienced it a little bit later. As I got older, I found that my taste, in movies in general, in a lot of ways, started to shift. And again, I go back to the same thing. 2001 was one of those movies that just cemented the idea that the more real you make it, the more powerful it can be. And there's a thing about these horror films, especially the character, like you said, the universal characters, or however you describe them, they're incredibly fantastic and obviously could not exist, but still terrifies us in many ways. But Rosemary's Baby is something that, in the realm of the ridiculous, it was handled so blisteringly realistically that it just, the first time I saw it, I just thought, oh my gosh, where is this story going to go? What the heck is going on? Because I did not know what it was. I did not know what it was about. I got to experience it kind of straightforward for the first time. And I just could not believe that because the storytelling was so deft. It was so fascinating, and just bought into the narcissism of so many characters, especially Rosemary's husband, who's an actor. and coming from that world and knowing just how many narcissists there are out there and what they would do to become a star, or just make sure their careers were successful, that they would actually sell the soul of their wife and let her become impregnated by the devil so that he could reproduce, is just the most outlandish idea. So the only way to make that work is without being laughed off out of the theater, is to really, I mean, you've got Mia Farrow and you've got these incredible actors playing these amazing characters so well that you buy it. And then to have a character who in the end turns around and then gives in to the whole cult, this whole devil cult, to raise her child, which is this hideous monster that you barely see for a fraction of a moment. I mean, and that's all it takes, because really you've filled your mind with so much more than what anyone could create and put in front of an audience. I found it incredibly amazing, and then went back and read the book, which is an incredible book to read. And I have to say, one of the rare instances where the film follows the book so closely that they're completely they're completely interchangeable. You almost don't have to read it. If you watch the movie, you have read the book. That's how much, and as much as I hate Roman Polanski, he was an extraordinary filmmaker and made one of the greatest films of all time. I think it ranks on top 20 lists very, very frequently. So yeah, that's my pick for the 60s.
Well, my pick, it's right behind me. So here we go.
Okay.
Psycho. A huge, and I think you are too, like a Hitchcock fan. It's not my favorite Hitchcock movie, but it is from the 60s. I saw it, much later on, obviously. Scared the hell out of me then, still scares me now when I watch it. Certain scenes still get to me there. And if I'm thinking about it now in the shower, I will take that peek out. Even today. So just to, if I'm thinking, I don't do that all the time, but if I am thinking about the movie, it just comes across my mind, I will take that peek just to see. I thought such a great idea, and they've used this later on, but we have the main character who we're all invested in, and then we're killing off the main character. We're killing off the main character, like, 20 minutes or whatever, 30 minutes into the movie. I like, wow, what happens now?
Oh yeah. I mean, that was probably the most important piece of filmmaking in film history. And I don't know a lot about the history of it, only that Hitchcock, he was kind of terrified over the idea of trying to do this to see if he could get away with it, because it just doesn't happen. No one else is really, I can't think of any examples contemporary to that film where that's been tried or experimented with, because if you do, you're just trying to copy Psycho. It was incredibly risky, but yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, obviously we're spoiling the heck out of it, but yeah, it starts out as basically almost like a little mini crime drama that turns into a horrific horror story, I would say. And I might be tipping your hand a little bit for later on, but From Dusk Till Dawn is kind of that sort of story. Okay, well, we'll wait and talk about that, because that is similar. Where I've only seen it once. It was a long time ago. We'll talk about it more in our next the next show. But the entire short story shifts halfway through. It becomes something completely different, as I recall. But so you'll have to fill me in on that. But that's the only thing that pops into my head where it was tried, and of course, by someone who's really good at it, Quentin Tarantino. But yeah, this movie was so completely freaky weird, and of course I had to look at it, and I had to weigh it against Rosemary's Baby. But my pick was very clear for me. But
I knew
yeah.
that was your pick, so
Yeah,
I can see it clear.
yeah.
So,
But no, good one.
now we're going to bring it on home. We're going to go into the 1970s, and again, there were a ton of great ones in the 70s. This seemed like a golden age for horror to me.
Oh.
I'm just looking at some. I'm going to let you say your pick before I go into them, but there were just so many great ones here.
Well, my pick is very similar to Rosemary's Baby for the very same reasons, and it was The Exorcist.
Okay.
I was too young to see it in the theater at the time. I was incredibly drawn to it just by the posters, the imagery, all the I'm going to say that, I'm losing my words, but all the hoopla around it, and how we heard a story in Los Angeles that at one of the screenings, one of the theaters in LA, a woman had a heart attack. She was so scared. And I don't know if that's 100% true or not. She might have had a heart attack, but whether or not it was because she was scared by the film remains to be seen. But it had, the trailers had such a haunting quality to them. And when I finally did see it, yet again, I mean, one of just like the most real portrayals of something completely outlandish. And I think that for me, that's a big draw and an attraction. And in terms of horror or science fiction, I mean, if you're going to go, I like it when you go the all out realistic way, or you go the totally opposite into the ridiculous and ludicrous and just outlandish. When filmmakers try to handle it in the middle, it doesn't really work for me and doesn't scare me, doesn't really interest me, and all of that. But I just, and it's so funny because my wife Tia, my lovely wife Tia, that I love watching movies with and love talking to him about her with, because she didn't see movies for decades. When she raised her kids, she just didn't go to the movies unless they were Disney movies. And yet she worked in a movie theater. She worked in a movie theater that played The Exorcist back in its first run. And she just all she's ever said is, stupid movie. It's just stupid. It's just stupid. So ridiculous. Doesn't scare me. Not frightening. I don't like it. It's just stupid. And I can't, it's just like, it's mind boggling to me because the acting is so top notch and the scenes, I mean, and again, when filmmakers try to recreate film sets or the life of filmmakers and actors and artists, it's despite the fact that we all know how everything works, it never is portrayed that realistically on the screen. And I don't know why that happens. I really don't know why. But in The Exorcist, she's an actress and she's in a movie that's shooting not far from where she lives. And they really, really brought together the dynamics of all these different characters, the director and the star, and how she's working through her work as her daughter is suddenly changing right before her very eyes, and she doesn't understand it. And her characters spiral into the hell of trying to figure out what's going on with their daughter when no one can explain it, and all the hospital scenes and the tests, and oh my god, all that stuff was just like, of course that's what you would do if something like this really happened.
Yes.
The last thing you would think is your daughter's possessed by the devil. I mean, that's just not where you go. It just doesn't, it's just not in our, and so for me, that's why it was so terrifying, because that is exactly what was happening. And again, no one can figure it out. And there you are with this hideous monster. And she was a hideous monster, even though she was tied to a bed, she had incredible power. I mean, oh God, it was just, it just still gives me chills. And I will watch it. I will watch it every once in a while. I have to watch it by myself because my wife thinks it's stupid. So I've got to do it in the middle of the night or early in the morning. But yeah, that's one I will go back to every so many years just to get that grit under my skin again.
I posted this once. Looking at The Exorcist. as a parent, it's difficult to say if it's demonic possession or normal teen behavior. So it's very tough. So, so you're not sure.
That's great.
But this is incomprehensible, will be incomprehensible to you. And this is not because I didn't like it, but because it did scare me. That's a movie I've only seen once also. I've not seen The Exorcist more than once. It did scare me as a kid, and I probably watched it too soon also, but too young. But I've not gone back to watch it, and I probably should at some point. but, but there are a couple of movies like that I watched just once and I haven't gone back to it. And I know it's a classic, so I'm going to have to revisit. For my pick for the 70s, and I'll go into some of the others, by the way. I was looking here. I mean, there's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Amityville Horror, Trilogy of Terror. You know, there's so many great ones from that decade. And Friday the 13th also. It's just, you know, you have so many great ones, and so it's tough to pick. And what's funny is Young Frankenstein is listed under the horror movies of the 70s. I did not pick it because to me it's just not scary at all. It's just funny.
No, it's just funny. Yes,
right.
I mean that's yeah. But it's interesting it made any list.
Horror movie, right? So, but I went with.
Well, I gotta poke a hole. I gotta stick my finger into Friday the 13th. I hated that movie. I saw it in the first run in the theater. I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. I could not believe anyone thought the movie was scary. It wasn't scary to me. It was just like, okay, this is just gore for the sake of gore. I mean, I'm sitting in the theater.
So is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
But which I've never seen. Oh. I have never seen, because I just Friday the 13th, and I don't know if Texas Chainsaw Massacre is before that or after it. But it just ruined me for all those movies. I thought I can't waste my time because I think they're dumb. See, now that's where I step in and use that phraseology. Because I mean, I'm sorry, at the very beginning of Friday the 13th, where I lost it immediately was the second the camera was moving around. It was chilling for a moment, and then I heard and I thought, oh no, you've lost me. You will never get me back. And they never did. So there it is.
My favorite. I don't like.
I know it's not your favorite. I know it's not your favorite, but you brought it up, so I had to say something.
It is listed in there, but it is listed. It's still considered a classic, I think.
Oh, it is. So, it is. There's no doubt.
But I don't like I don't like those slasher films at all. I don't. I like the humorous horror or like something story wise, but I don't like the slasher films. But I went with it, and it is listed under horror, so no complaints from anyone. So this is my favorite director. You know, Spielberg's my favorite director. I picked Jaws, and Jaws is listed under horror. Know what? And
absolutely, I applaud that choice.
And I've seen that so many times also. I don't think my kids have seen it yet. I need to make them watch it. But I've seen that movie so many times. It's still scary. And, you know, everyone's read the stories about, you know, he had problems with mechanical shark. And that's why you didn't rarely see it. It just added to the suspense, added to the tension that you don't see it so much. And you just
for sure. Yeah, that's one of those great examples where the limitation actually enhanced the art completely. Because I mean, and I will admit this, it is one of my favorite movies. I love to rewatch it. It's so well done, and it's so it is just the meat, the introduction. I mean, it's a real life monster. It is a true monster that exists. These creatures exist. He turned the obsession with great white sharks into a cottage industry. I mean, you know, we've got Shark Week now, which is like one of the most popular. Is it on History Channel or Discovery? I'm not sure. Discovery.
I never miss it every year.
It's like I have to watch it. I have to watch it. And that was absolutely incredible. I totally agree. But I have to say, and maybe it's just because I'm in the industry, when first time I saw it, now Jaws is the first movie and only movie that I ever screamed out loud in the theater. I mean, literally jumped out of my seat and screamed. And it was the fantail of the boat underwater when the bobbing head came out, with Richard Dreyfuss is in the water and his bubbles come out and he's not screaming. You know he is, but you can barely hear it. When that head popped out, I just I had never done that in my life. And I was so thrilled over that. I thought, finally, a movie scared me out of my seat. But I kind of lost it with the rubber shark, because when it was chomping on Robert Shaw, I could see the teeth bending and moving. And I just thought, okay, I can't suspend my disbelief anymore. I know that this is a mechanical, thing, and it looks like rubber, and I can't believe people are buying this, but they were, and they have, and it's a huge classic. But that was the
first summer blockbuster thing that they.
Yes, it was. Oh yeah, no, yeah. He also created inadvertently the way summer
movies have done.
Movies were released from that point forward. It was like the summer blockbuster turned into a thing. Yeah.
Now I'm gonna have to rewatch the movie with the kids. I'm gonna have to force them to watch that movie at some point.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would love to hear. I would love to hear what they think, especially
But you don't see the people that that watch that. I posted that before. Do you see the clips of people who watch it like in the ocean, like on rafts or something, or they like tubes that they sit in tubes and watch it in the water? I couldn't do that.
Oh no. And again, that movie actually scared my wife so much that she doesn't like to get into pools. She still to this day does not like to be in a pool. And she'll wade out in the ocean, but she won't go and get up to her neck in the water. It's just it's like, so I mean, it's
well, I think no matter where you are in Florida, before you go into any body of water, you have to check it, no matter where, even if it's a pool. So
100% shark bite capital of the world, New Smyrna Beach.
Right. You also have the gators that get into pools every now and then. So
that's true.
You have to watch those.
True.
But anyway,
we have our share of monsters here.
1930s to 1970s edition of our favorite horror movies. Make sure you tune in next week for our 1980s to 2010s edition, and can't wait for that one. There's a lot of good choices on that one as well. But once again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann. And again, we thank you so much for watching, and thank you. Please subscribe. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.